Hi, this is Dana Unruh. This is my EDL 850 Module 13 presentation on tort law. Definitions. Tort is a civil wrong that causes someone to suffer loss or harm resulting in legal liability for a person who commits the tortious act. An unintentional or negligent tort is a failure to behave with a level of care that somebody of ordinary prudence would have exercised under the same circumstances. The behavior usually consists of actions, but can also consist of omissions when there is some duty to act. An intentional tort is a type of tort that can only result from an intentional act of the defendant. Depending on the exact tort alleged, either general or specific intent has to be proven. Common intentional torts are battery, assault, false imprisonment, trespass to land, trespass to chattels, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. This is a chart that I just really found interesting, and I wanted to include it for more of a reference point for everybody. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that, so you can come back and look later. Johnson Johnson versus School District of Millard. On September 15th, a first grade student attended his music class. His teacher gave brief instructions on how to play the London Bridges game along with the accompanying lyrics and song. The teacher gave instructions on behavioral expectations, turned the music on, and then walked away to do other work on or near the blackboard. The time frame is disputed, as well as what the teacher was actually doing near the blackboard, but within seconds of turning her back, the student claims that he was being handled too rough and that they were swinging him hard and fast. He was then pushed or hurled as they released him from the bridge position into the bookcase and badly cut above his eye. The cut was to the bone, and he received 50 stitches, and he had temporary blurred vision. Negligence was found on the part of the school teacher, as she was not properly supervising the students, and the school was fined $21,226.10. Proactive measures. I would have spoke with both the music and physical education teachers about special concerns and liabilities that would arise in their classrooms. I would also have stressed supervision during any games or activities where students lay hands on each other. Reactive measure would have been, I would have interviewed both the teacher and the students who were in attendance when the injury occurred. I would keep strict documentation on each conversation, and I would also have a secondary conversation with the teacher about using pre-recorded songs as a quote-unquote babysitter while she did the work. Professional ethics. Proper supervision as well as commitment to the task at hand would have decreased, if not totally stopped, this occurrence from happening. Mitchell versus Cedar Rapids Community School. Two special education students, a 19-year-old male and a 14-year-old female, engaged in consensual relations the day of the event. The female called her mom and asked if she could ride the bus home with to her boyfriend's house. She lied to her mom and told her mom that his mother would be home. The two students decided not to wait till the end of the day and skipped their last class and ended up engaging in sexual relations, ultimately in a friend's garage. The teacher reported the absence according to policy, but did not go above and beyond to locate the two students. And the school was found 70% accountable for negligence and the sexual relations taking place, while the 19-year-old male was found 30% accountable in intentional tort for sexual assault, and damages were awarded to her and her family in the amount of $500,000. I personally do not agree with those findings. Proactive measures. There should be a policy and protocol in place on how to deal with special education students going missing from school. These policies should also include considerations to be written into their IEPs for the higher needs students. All staff should be trained on these protocols and policies. A reactive measure. Again, I would have interviewed both the teacher and the student who were involved when the students skipped class. I would have kept strict documentation on each conversation, and I definitely would have had a secondary conversation with the special education teachers about informing parents immediately when they have observed a relationship like this with one of their special ed students, and how they needed to notify a parent immediately if one of their special education students had skipped a class, and do not rely on the automated call system. Professional ethics. This may not have changed the fact that the students ended up having sexual relations It would have, however, lessened, if not completely gotten rid of the school's liability in the case. The teacher didn't have written policies or protocols, but like we know, just because you don't know the law or haven't foreseen it happening doesn't make you exempt to following these types of rules. Frame versus Camo. A licensed science teacher was acting as a substitute on the day of this incident. The teacher was administering a spelling test when several students became disruptive. Upon the substitute teacher requesting for them to leave, the students complied. Casey Frame then began speaking during the test after this and was asked to leave twice nicely. When he failed to comply, the substitute approached Casey's desk. He stood and faced the teacher in what I can only guess was an aggressive manner. The teacher grabbed his arm to assist him out of the classroom. Casey, again, to what I can only imagine, tried to pull his arm away, probably lost his balance, slipped, fell backwards into the podium, and came to rest on the blackboard, or against the blackboard. The teacher approached Casey again, turning him around, helping him up by the arm, and then assisted him out of the classroom. That evening, the mother called the police and pressed criminal charges on the teacher for battery. The court found that the teacher was not in fault and had acted appropriately in this manner because this child was disruptive and the substitute was acting in a sense of safety for the other students. The proactive measure. I would have reviewed cases like this with my teachers yearly so they understand the liabilities we face as teachers. We would have also had a session on how you would have dealt with this situation. I run a municipal recreation district, and the only way we can prepare for things is to practice. So I would run practice drills on sessions like this, so my teachers have a better idea of how they may deal with it. I would also make sure that each teacher is CPI trained. CPI is a non-violent crisis prevention and intervention method. If our teachers were certified, it would only further to protect our students and staff. Reactive measure would have been, I would have interviewed both the teacher and students who were involved in this incident. I would have kept strict documentation on the conversations, and I would have had a secondary conversation with the teacher who was acting as a substitute on how we may have dealt with this differently. If the teacher was not already CPI trained, I would have immediately scheduled it. The professional ethics. In a situation like these, there's rarely time to ask for assistance. However, knowing that this was a contracted teacher and another subject, he should have clearly known the staff behaviors and expectations. He should have called or had another student call for assistance immediately when he realized things were going out of control. Flanagan versus Canton Central School District, sorry. In this case, a physical education teacher dismissed the majority of the class because they had become unruly and hadn't been listening. We've all had to do this, take extra recess time away, things like that. It's nothing out of the norm for us. Normally, the teacher would have supervised the locker room behavior, but on this day, he felt the need to speak privately to a student about the behavior he had been exhibiting before entering the locker room. While in the locker room, a boy was pushed from behind and hit a bench and a locker hard enough to cause injuries to his head, and he ended up having to have an emergency splenectomy. The mother of the boy filed suit stating that if there was adequate supervision, the injuries would not have been sustained. The court found that while under normal circumstances the teacher would not have been liable, but knowing the behavior of the day and the attitudes that the students had been exhibiting, the teacher should have foreseen problems happening in the locker room, and this therefore made him liable. The teacher should have proactive measures. The teacher should have went over protocols and policies before the school year had started on what to do in this situation. And the administration also should have talked to him about how to take the student inside the locker room door to talk to him instead of outside of the locker room door and leaving the class unsupervised. When he did this, it not only granted him, or if he would have done this, it would have not only granted him supervision of the whole class, but it would have covered him for liability of being alone with another student who he was actually reprimanding. The reactive measure. I would have interviewed both teacher and student and that were involved in this incident. I would have kept strict documentation on each conversation, and I would have had a secondary conversation with the physical education teacher on how he could have dealt with this differently. I also would have had a conversation with him on how he had actually created the liability when he had decided to deal with the situation as he did, because he not only created the liability in the locker room, he created a liability for our school being alone while reprimanding a student in the gym. Professional ethics. If the teacher could have seen past his own anger and looked at the bigger picture, the liability could have been avoided. Always, always, always properly supervise your students. Gebser versus Lago Vista Independent School. This is a different one, and I thought I would include it because it's definitely something that we see, unfortunately, more and more in the news today. In this case, a teacher started a sexual relationship with a student he was teaching. The relationship lasted from one school year to over the summer to the next year. While they had sexual relations several times during school hours, it was never on school property, and no other school employees were privy to their relationship. The two were discovered actually in the act, and the teacher was arrested immediately. The student's mother filed suit against the school for negligent tort and against the teacher for sexual assault. The school was found not liable due to the fact that nobody else knew about this relationship. If they had known and done nothing, the school would have been liable. The family continued to pursue litigation against the teacher. The district fired him immediately, and the State Board of Education of Texas revoked his teaching license. Proactive in this case. There were no existing board policies on sexual harassment nor any procedures on filing grievance. This would have been the first thing I would change if I was in that district. I would also go through the severity of the repercussions of this form of a relationship with all of my employees. Reactive. I would interview both the teacher and the student who were involved in this incident. I would keep strict documentations and conversations, and I would also have a secondary conversation with the teacher in which I would have fired him and informed him that I was reporting the incident to the state licensing board. I would have contacted the school's lawyer, braced myself, and started preparing for the press release information for the backlash from this event. Professional ethics. This teacher breached every ethic we hold as teachers. Regardless of the fact that it was a consensual relationship, it is still illegal and immoral. You never have any form of relationship like this with a student. These are my resources, and thank you.